Welcome back to Federal Insights, going beyond data protection, sponsored by Veritas here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Mike Malaret, the Director of Sales Engineering at Veritas Federal. We heard from Prem Jadwani, the Chief Technology Officer for Government Acquisitions. And now we're going to hear from Kurt Steege, the Chief Technology Officer of Thundercat Technology. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And Kurt, good to have you on. Let's talk about the importance of visibility into data assets. This is something that agencies often struggle with. They know they've got a lot out there, but they don't necessarily have a good means of inventorying and then seeing what they've got. So talk about the importance of that as you protect against the dangers of ransomware and other cyber threats.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Great to be on. I actually want to throw something back real quick to what Prem said earlier about like data is the new oil. I think that's a really important thing to look at right there. And you know, as we look across the different areas that are working within the federal government right now, I would actually say that information, its safety, and its sharing is a key product of the government. It's probably the most important thing that the government puts out there across the board. You know, it's the very fabric of what everybody does on a day-to-day basis, from, where it's being collected in the field to being analyzed and being utilized across everything. And visibility is extremely important there because, you don't know what you don't know in a lot of cases, right? I think one of the things that I remembered from a couple of months ago, discussing this subject with Veritas specifically, is they had deployed their data insight product at a large federal agency to help them understand stored data, and the findings that were very interesting there. Like 58% of their data was dark, meaning it hadn't been used in 3 years, or looked at, or had no owner in Active Directory. 31% of their data was redundant, obsolete, and trivial. It hadn't been accessed between 1 and 3 years. And then only 11% of their data was the active information that was being used on a consistent basis to run the agency itself. So before starting down the road of protecting the data and looking at that and trying to analyze it, you really need to know what you have. Data visibility is really the first step here, and it's where many of the agencies go wrong. Agency leaders, ask agency leaders what data is the most important, and then dig into it and say, ask about classification, storage, protection, all those kind of things. And if the leaders don't have the answers where everything is, and folks don't know where it is, all the more reason for a full data management strategy to start to build on that, because, finding what's there, because in a lot of cases, there's stuff that you don't even realize is there.
It's almost like you're making the case to bring back optical and tape storage systems for some of that data that may never get looked at again. But
sure, why not? I mean, between that or that's also the idea of what a lot of folks are doing, and to continue on that, a lot of folks do that within, that's the data that in many cases folks want to move to, cheap and deep storage. If it could be tape, it could be, places like Iron Mountain, it could be, places, that's a good place for utilization for cloud strategies as well.
All right, but sometimes you do have to back up data, either the 11% or the other 89%. And so how do you speed up and orchestrate data recovery? Lots of agencies are talking about robotic process automation. I guess kind of maybe taking orchestration to the next step, or maybe they're interchangeable. But what are the best practices now for doing this not manually?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, to go back to the study that I just mentioned a little while ago. Once that was done and they took that intelligence received from there, it was able to kind of use that in conjunction with a lot of different processes, scan the data, and then through policy, move it from things like primary storage, as we discussed, to cheaper storage areas seamlessly with no impact on the end users. You could always go back and get that information, and then, pull it back into the utilization side. But what happens is, they take that, in this example, a lot of that dark data got moved to Amazon Glacier. Sensitive data was moved to long-term storage device, automated retention policy, all those kind of things, and locked away, sort of worm storage type things as well. And then the most important data, they said, okay, well, this is the data we need to run our business every single day, business, agency, mission, everything. Move it to high-speed primary storage. Much lower storage, primary storage footprint on the stuff that costs a lot of money, and then kind of take that out of the daily backup kind of stuff,
Sure.
Move it to stuff that's out there. Once you have a good handle on where your data is, what paths it's traversing and the relative value of that data based on, what we talked about data visibility before, you go into the next phase of things like creating a data management framework, breaking down silos not only for the data itself and kind of centralizing where you have that, but then the methodologies and tools that you use for recovery. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with different agencies that kind of have multiple different ways of how they're backing things up. And taking that information, it just leads only to not only wasting of capital, but wasting of time as well to get it back when there is a problem. Because, hey, there's going to be times when you're going to need to pull that information back.
All right.
And if you don't have a good way to do that and a quick way to do that, it's,
it's going to get you in trouble. Sure.
Yep.
And briefly, if you would also talk about encryption and what are some of the best practices of where encryption comes into play. In the ransomware, it's only part of the protection you need, but it's something you need it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, like everybody who works in the federal government should be, kind of utilizing the NIST recommendation for key management there in terms of that. It's SP 857. And you can go through that. It has all the requirements that are, all the information that's there. And we talk things, when you talk about encryption, you're talking about encrypting data at rest, encrypting data in flight, and going through those things. But I would say probably if you're going to, all this requires encryption keys. Probably the one area, if I was going to, pick one thing in order for folks to really concentrate on, is centralized key management. As you encrypt more and more data, it becomes increasingly more difficult to manage the keys. And most folks are using manual process. It could be spreadsheets, it could be this, it could be that. But really getting to a centralized key management system, secure, efficient key generation, storage, distribution, policies associated with that, so that you can then move those things around. And the one area that that this really helps in is the next phase. So folks are talking about encrypting data at rest and encrypting data in flight. But what's actually happening right now is runtime environments. So it's great when you're moving it, it's great when it's sitting there, but when you're actually running the application, to actually be able to kind of encrypt the information while it's there and run it in secure enclaves, and dealing with key management solutions like Fortanix is an example there as well, and going through those processes to make sure those things are being able to be secured in conjunction with the different areas in the hardware platforms as well.
Great advice from Kurt Steege, the Chief Technology Officer of Thundercat Technology. We also heard from Prem Jadwani, the Chief Technology Officer for Government Acquisitions, Inc. Next, we're going to hear from Mike Mallaret, the Director of Sales Engineering for Veritas Federal. I'm Tom Temin. This is Federal Insights, going beyond data protection, sponsored by Veritas here on Federal News Network.